Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So pre-Thanksgiving, Tuesday morning, a little earlier in the week than usual, but we missed last week, so we have a lot to catch up on.
That is right, Bill. And I should throw out my just a heads up. I woke up this morning with a plan to do, it's sort of like when you go on vacation, you end up doing all this work before you go on vacation. And I plan to do a whole bunch of stuff today in preparation for taking a couple days off over the holiday. And I woke up very congested. So I'm on a lot of drugs. So if I sound crazier than normal, then we can just blame that.
This is my time to strike. This is the time for a takeover.
Yes, this is your moment, Bill.
Though
we ride at dawn.
But you got more dressed up than usual for me.
This is my attempt to will myself into being professional and energetic by looking my best. I will rise to the occasion and power through because we need to give the fans what they want, Bill. This is Thanksgiving week. They're going to be maybe commuting. There might be a long drive to grandma's house. You're going to want to listen to Matt and Bill. Maybe you've had enough of your crazy uncle and his Trump politics at Thanksgiving. You want to duck out early. You need a place of solace, a sanctuary. We could be that, Bill. And so I felt like I could have taken today off like you did last week. I could have done that. But I said, no, I'm going to power through.
Well, I'm sad that I took off last week because it delayed my victory lap over the Arizona governor's race, which you cruelly mocked me on Elon Musk's platform for daring to predict a Katie Hobbs victory. You accused me of the cruelest insult you could level to a pundit, wish casting.
Well, I think I prefaced it by saying Bill Scher is a very shrewd and astute political analyst. But in this case, I think he's wish casting. And I'm telling you, I really thought Kari Lake was going to win. And this is, I think maybe I underestimated Arizona is what I did actually. But I really thought she was going to win. And I want to let's just give credit where it's due, Bill. When you made that prediction that Katie Hobbs was going to win, I think that was a gutsy prediction. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. And to be fair, I wasn't saying this like take it to the bank, bet your house on it kind of prediction, but I was following through on the logic I had for the rest of the midterms, which was that Crazy was going to lose in competitive places. And I can understand people saying, okay, maybe that's true in a lot of places, but Katie Hobbs, oh God, she's so terrible. She can't, make it through an interview without, awkwardly clinging to her talking points, and she's ducking the debates, and she seems so weak, and Kari Lake is so polished. So sure, maybe Joe Kent's going to lose Washington 3, maybe Blake Masters can't win the Senate race, but Kari Lake's a different category. And so I just didn't make an exception for Crazy in this case.
Well, I think part of my problem is, as an analyst, I look at the electorate and I say, well, you were crazy enough to roll the dice for Donald Trump in 2016. So what are they? Is the electorate sensible and sane, or are they willing to roll the dice and do crazy things? And I don't think we've gotten a consistent answer to that. I think that they sort of waver, whereas my take would be consistent. And so I think maybe I underestimated the voters of Arizona. I attributed to them the same thing that when they voted for Trump in 2016.
I've
Now, granted, they voted for Biden narrowly in 2020, so maybe that should have been a sign.
Well, I think that's the important thing here. I mean, I overestimated the electorate in 2016, but not by much. I mean, the thing that I think has warped our analytical skills is that 2016 was a fluke. It was a fluky election. Donald Trump did not win the popular vote. He just barely won a few swing states. And we've extrapolated that to mean voters are suckers. And you can't, I mean, look, obviously Democrats can walk themselves to death. You're not going to win over voters with 10-point plans. And so one of the weird ironies of Katie Hobbs is that, as I wrote about this at the Washington Monthly, in the last week, when Kari Lake's doing a rally with Steve Bannon and Blake Masters, Katie Hobbs is doing a housing policy roundtable with 10 other people and like literally no media in the room. This is like 1 week before election day. And so you could reasonably argue, okay, this Katie Hobbs person has no idea how to win an election. She's not even connecting with voters. And Kari Lake, maybe Steve Bannon is Looney Tunes, but she's putting out some charisma. She's putting out some energy. She's getting people riled up. And so I'm not arguing you win elections with housing policy roundtables. I think Katie Hobbs reasonably concluded, I'm not going to win a media war with Kari Lake. That's not my strong suit. Why should I play on her turf? I need to have enough faith in the electorate that if it's a referendum on Kari Lake and all of her crazy stuff, they're going to take the alternative, and I just got to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
And
you and I mean, I think you and I both were somewhat sympathetic of the decision not to debate. And as you know, it's not a good thing, but it might have been the right move for her to not debate.
And I saw just some guy on Twitter, not a huge name or anything, saying, don't assume this means everybody can skip the debate, that the debate question has been answered. I'm sorry about
but it's not just Katie Hobbs. It was John Fetterman. He debated, but it was largely seen as a very bad debate, and it didn't stop him from winning.
Well, you could argue that means better to have a bad debate, but show up.
Yeah.
Show up and take your lumps. It shows that you're not scared. But I would argue, I mean, look at Tim Ryan had a good debate against J.D. Vance, overperformed somewhat, but still lost, not a terribly close race. I thought Val Demings did a great job against Marco Rubio. It meant absolutely nothing. I think to the average voter, I mean, let's stop thinking like pundits. Stop thinking like political junkies. Normal people don't watch debates. Number one, slight exemption for like a presidential debate, which generally has kind of high ratings, but even then, it's not everybody. And those numbers go down over the course of the first, after the first debate, the second and third tend to be less. And what does everybody say after one of these debates? God, that was so stupid. Oh, what a waste of time that was. Oh, God, it was just stupid talking points, bad questions, and cheap insults. I couldn't even make it through the whole thing. Very few people look forward to debates. So, I mean, the argument that you have to show up is the average voter thinks it is a requirement for the job. You got to pass this test for me to take you seriously as a candidate. But I think the available evidence is that voters just do not care and actively think of debates as a bad thing that wastes everybody's time. So they're not going to punish you for skipping. And if you're a campaign manager, campaign consultant, and you're saying, how do I use my candidate's precious time? Why should I waste all of that debate prep for an event that I share the spotlight with the other candidate? It's not even like a day of like great coverage for me. I mean, most coverage of debates is like candidate X said this and candidate Y said that. It's rarely clean victory one over the other. Sometimes someone really screws it up, but that's rare. So chances are it's going to be a wasted day for the campaign and wasted time preparing for that wasted day. Why not use that time to do stuff just for us with our events and our organizing and creating our ads? I think you're going to see much less debating going forward for logical reasons that average voters won't punish candidates for, because, and I say this not happily, I like debates. Debates are fun for me because I'm weird. But objectively speaking, debates are not useful exercises for determining who is the better candidate.
Now, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about how 2016 is now looking like the fluke. We've now had 3 subsequent elections where Trumpism has effectively been tried and failed at the ballot box, right? So,
right.
But 2016 still, I think I've made this point before, Bill, but bear with me. You know, in the NFL, it happens all the time where a really good team will get beat by a bad team. You know, it's why they call it any given Sunday. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, if a random team happens to beat the Bills or the Chiefs, a week later, that random team will probably lose to the Commanders or something. You know what I mean? And so they have a week of looking better than they are, of people saying, "Wow, is this team for real?" And then they play and they lose, you know? Mm-hmm. And so you get about a week. But in presidential politics, you get 4 years. And so Donald Trump, I think, won this fluky election, but he wasn't tested again, really, because midterms, presidents always lose midterms. Mm-hmm. Their party. So really, it was 4 years of people, I think, falsely attributing brilliant status to Donald Trump as a political tactician. And I think it really stuck. I'm not sure what to do about this, but I think it is a weird phenomenon whereby if you get lucky and happen to win a presidential race by virtue of luck, it's really hard for anyone to demonstrate that because the next time there'll be a chance is 4 years later.
Well, and it's not even just the 4 years, because we have this election too. Now, of course, 2022 is not completely clean for analytical purposes, but we know that Trumpism lost on the ballot in 2018. You know, clear disaster, 41 Democratic House flips taking over the House. 2020, generally clear Trump loss, lose the presidency, lose the Senate, and say, well, we picked up a few House seats. You know, it wasn't all bad, but you really can't attribute that to Trumpism carrying the day. Democrats still kept the House. They still had an edge in the House popular vote. Now, 2022, we don't have all the votes counted because California is still trickling in. So I think that margin is going to reduce. But it does seem like not only will Republicans take the House, that's already established by a narrow amount, but we'll also win the House popular vote. I think right now it's staying around 3 points, so it might narrow some. Now, they didn't take the Senate. They didn't win any of the competitive races with open seats or against Dem incumbents. Ron Johnson hung on just barely, just by a point. And we still have the Georgia runoff to play out, but I do think Warnock has the edge there.
Yeah, and let me just say that will be the next test in the Bill versus Matt prediction game. I picked Herschel Walker. I think you and I are tied, right? Not so far. So far, we've each gotten 8 out of 10 of our predictions correct. I think the only one
we're talking Senate now.
I'm sorry, and the U.S. Senate. So we're putting the gubernatorial thing aside. In the U.S. Senate, I believe the only one that you and I got wrong was Nevada.
Correct.
Am I right?
I fail to have proper confidence in the Reid machine. Not to mention Cortez Masto's own campaign. I mean, I think she played the crazy card well. She had Republicans calling out Adam Laxalt for election denialism. I just thought Laxalt wasn't as obviously crazy as a Walker or Blake Masters. I mean, you know, Oz isn't quite crazy, but just really lame. So I thought, and just the polling seem stronger. But of course, as I knew myself, because I pointed out previously, Democrats overperformed Nevada polls pretty consistently. That's
Yeah.
arguably Reed Machine for you. So we blew that one, but we did split on Georgia.
Right. So as of now, we're 8 for 9, but we've got Georgia.
Right.
And I picked Herschel Walker, and you picked Raphael Warnock.
And you said we can't switch. We had to hold our predictions in the runoff. We couldn't change it up.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think I probably would switch now, but I'm going to dance with the one that brung me, even though
What's the argument Walker pulls this out?
I think the argument that Walker pulls this out is one could argue that because it matters less, it actually matters less. The Senate does not hang in the balance. So Georgia's full of Republicans, and there are Republicans who voted for Brian Kemp, and then they didn't vote at all for Senate. Maybe they left that blank. And now they get to vote for their party, but it's not going to flip control of the Senate. So the consequences, that would be the argument. But I could see it going the other way too, Bill. I could see the fact that I think you could just as easily make the argument that they might have held their nose and voted for Herschel Walker in order to give Mitch McConnell the gavel. But now that it doesn't matter, these Republicans will feel that they can not vote their conscience and maybe not even show up. What do you think?
I think the latter. I mean, I think there's an argument that partisans will be partisans. They'll vote for a candidate with bad character or bad intelligence just because of the letter next to their name, which is not an unreasonable calculation to make, quite frankly. I can see Republicans showing up saying, I need Republicans to take the Senate, stop Biden from putting more judges on the judiciary. I don't care if Herschel Walker is the biggest moron on the planet or the biggest hypocrite on the planet. Now that's not at stake. So I think that motivation for Republicans to show up for a objective train wreck of a candidate, that motivation's off the table.
I tend to think you're right. But I'm not going to, so I guess I would say if I were picking today, I would probably go Warnock, but I'm not going to do that. Not gonna do it. I'm sticking, I'm going to stick with Herschel Walker just out of stubborn honor, I guess. But I, as of today, I would flip if I'd given myself leeway to flip flop. I probably would flip flop.
I want to go.
So now I'm screwed either way, right? I'm now in a no-win position. That's okay.
Do you hear me okay? By the way, I realize I have my microphone I'm not sure my microphone's even properly plugged in. There we go. If I sound better now than before, I apologize. But I should have been okay, I think.
Yeah, you're good. By the way, I'm using a new microphone, Bill. I couldn't get Apple did some update, and then my Blue Yeti, which was working perfectly fine, wouldn't even be recognized by my computer. And so after a couple of weeks of going without a mic, just freestyling, I am now using a new mic. So good Lord willing, it'll sound okay.
Okay. So let's go back to Arizona, though. So what do you think about how Kari Lake is behaving? Most Republican candidates, most even Trumpy Republican candidates were conceding their elections and not charging fraud. Kari Lake is the exception. I mean, election denialism was practically a platform plank for her. Not too long ago, she was saying, I'm going to win the election. I will accept that result. But I think even just before election day, I think she was starting to plant some seeds of doubt in the veracity of the election apparatus. And now she's leaned in, completely, going to Mar-a-Lago, hugging Trump. Do you think she has a plan here?
Yeah, I think that this is probably, if you're just an ambitious person who doesn't care about the country, doesn't care about truth, this is probably the right career move. I think that she can be a podcaster or a Fox News host or whatever. I think that she now and she still could potentially kind of inherit the MAGA fan base from Trump at some point. So and maybe even be his vice president, despite the fact that she won't be the governor. Who knows? Donald Trump obviously didn't have any experience. So I get what she's doing. It's despicable, but I'm not surprised.
But is it a media play? I want to get a TV show out of this.
I think so, or a podcast, or a YouTube channel, or whatever. I mean, it doesn't even have to be Fox News. But although I don't know if you saw Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago, but they did a really good cold open with her with the Vaseline, screen, soft lens, or whatever it's called, and then at the end, it was like Fox and Friends, and at the end, she showed up on the curvy couch next to Steve Doocy and calling it Carrie and Friends. So it wouldn't surprise me.
But is it that, or is it actually thinking I could be Trump's VP? Is it political, or is it media?
I think it could be either. I just think it's a personal ambition play based on her. It's a career move rather than a, what is the right thing for the country or for Arizona move. So I think it makes sense in the context of a career move. Bill, while we're talking vice presidents, there's this Republican presidential race that is sort of a shadow campaign for president. And I don't know if you saw, but Mike Pence is out with a book, and he's been on different programs, and I'm finding him really annoying. I have to say. Now, I know you think I should be on the Mike Pence bandwagon, and you think that Mike Pence has a shot, but his talking points, it's like, I don't even know how to describe it. Someone on Twitter said that his message is basically like, sure, Donald Trump tried to kill me, but other than that, it's a weird message. What do you think of it?
Well, he's got to walk a very, very fine line, and if I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I do want to tie us back to what we were getting at before and trying to analyze what happened in 2020. Because you could say, even though Democrats did better than usual with the House midterm wise and kept the Senate, and the Trump candidates were the reason why Republicans performed below expectations, you could try to say, well, look, Republicans still took the House. Republicans still won the House popular vote. And look at Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis won going away. So he is Trump-like in his pugnacity. So we don't need an overhaul of our agenda and persona. We just need maybe to you could take that and say Trump can still do this, or we can do this, but just without Trump or without the 2020 focus. And the third analysis is we really screwed this up, and we need to clean slate it and be adults again, which argues for a Pence or a Youngkin type. Pence obviously has a very difficult line to walk because he can't wash his hands of the 4 years, but he's trying to say, I'm an adult and Trump isn't. I believe in democracy and Trump doesn't. So I don't think awkward's the right word. I think it is logically coherent to say, I like all these policies. I like
except for the time that they tried to overthrow the government.
Yeah, that's the part I don't like.
And kill me. Yeah,
but I like the immigration. I like I like the way done judges. I like the overturn Roe v. Wade. I like the tax cuts. Where I think it is hard, where I think it's actually hardest for Pence is not he tried to kill me, because I think he could say, I don't like that he tried to kill me at the end. I had no idea.
But I'd still vote for him if he's the nominee.
Kind of duck that, right? I don't think he said that flat out.
I think what Pence needs to say is, I like our policies, but Donald Trump is not fit to be president. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the character. He doesn't respect the Constitution. I would never vote for him again. He tried to kill me. He tried to overthrow the election. But I think I love conservative judges, and I like tax cuts.
But I think there is a Republican constituency that Pence represents. There is a soft Trump vote. There's a Republican vote that says, I really don't like Trump as a human being. I don't like January 6th. But boy, do I sure hate Nancy Pelosi. Man, do I hate Ocasio-Cortez. I can't have those numbnuts running the government. So I think he represents a faction of the party in doing that. Where I think it's hardest for Pence is defending Trump's foreign policy, because Pence is not a Putinite. Pence is a Reaganite. And I'm sure he never liked what Trump did in regards to Russia, but he couldn't come out and say it. So that's the one area where I think he is genuinely hypocritical, perhaps reasonably, politically speaking, but you can call him on that, and he will look awkward and hypocritical trying to answer questions on that, because he will not have a good answer for it.
I think all of these people, like, did you see this? Mike Pompeo, I saw this on Morning Joe. Apparently, they asked him, who's the most dangerous person in the world? And he said, like, the head of the teachers union.
Right, Randy Weingarten, which Randy Weingarten is not all that thrilled about, saying, I don't know if the truth is ridiculous or dangerous. I mean, he's basically saying this actual human being is the worst person in the world. And we do there are people out there that will take those kinds of things a little too literally and act on them.
But it's also just a weird thing. Like, they feel the need, like, we're going to distance from Trump, but we have to say our own crazy thing. Mm-hmm. I think Mike Pence is misplaying it. He has managed to alienate everybody. I think he's a joke. And the Trump people are never going to support him. The Trump people hate him. They think he's a traitor. They think he's a sellout. And then the people like me, we think he's just bullshitting us. He's not talking straight. He's basically doing a Ronald Reagan impersonation. Look, I could show you my poster. I love Reagan more than the next guy. But Mike Pence is essentially impersonating, like, a caricature of what he thinks Reagan would say. It's so inauthentic. I think it's incredibly lame. And I think it's a shame.
Well, what we don't know, and we can't know at this juncture, is what does a Trump DeSantis cage match do to the electorate? Not to mention what it do to those two candidates. You can see when Trump takes a swipe at DeSantis that there's this cry that comes out, mommy, daddy, don't fight. We love you both. We don't want to see you do this to each other. But that can't sustain. Trump kind of backed off a little bit, but that can't sustain. If they're both running for the prize, they're both going to tear each other to pieces.
Well, it's not just them. I mean, we have a potential bill for a repeat of 2016 where you have 10, 15 candidates running. Right. Nikki Haley runs, Larry Hogan runs, Asa Hutchinson runs, Mike Pence runs, Glenn Youngkin runs, Ron DeSantis runs, and Trump could end up winning with 30% or something.
Well, I mean, anybody could win with 30+% depending on how the vote gets sliced and diced.
But Trump has the most loyal 30% that are unmovable. Nobody else has a base that strong, presumably.
We don't know how broad the Trump base is when met with the force of DeSantis. It may well be that Trump's base is the most loyal, and Ron DeSantis is insufficient to the task of cutting it down to size. But we can't gauge that with poll numbers today. Poll numbers are very, very flimsy this far out, and the battle hasn't really been joined yet. So if I'm a Pence or a Youngkin or a Chris Christie or a Kristi Noem or a Chris Sununu, there's all sorts of people that can get into this. We don't know if there's going to be an opening for them after Trump and DeSantis find each other's weak spots and hammer it mercilessly. So I'm not saying you're wrong about Pence. I mean, it would be a long shot to say Pence would be the nominee at this point, and I would probably, my gut would probably be more partial to a Youngkin trying to pull it off than a Pence.
Yeah,
because he's got less baggage. But there's just way too many unknowns at this point, because this is not going to play out the way any other Republican primary has played out. We've never had a defeated president in a primary in modern times. We never had that person's VP also running at the same time. We've never had a swing state governor who doesn't govern like a swing state politician. And wins going away, but yet in contrary fashion to almost every other race on the map. So again, the logical conclusion is don't be crazy. Ron DeSantis says, wait a second, maybe you can be kind of crazy. You talk about my dog is ruining her dog bed. So
that's all right. Well, I don't think Ron DeSantis is crazy. I think Ron DeSantis, the benefit is that he's competent, he's serious, but he's very conservative. And so, I don't think he doesn't do chaos. I think the argument would be that he's a conservative who actually accomplishes stuff and gets things done. And, Ron DeSantis may be more conservative and maybe tackling culture war stuff, but I don't think, I think it's more calculate. I think he's calculating and competent. And so if you're a conservative who actually wants to get things done, I think that's the contrast with Trump.
I think you are starting down the path of making yourself comfortable with Ron DeSantis.
Well, I would say a couple things. One is I would love to be able to vote Republican again, and I would love to be able to be part of like the conservative movement and the Republican Party. That I cop to that, and I think there's a lot of people that probably have that desire. I also think it's justifiable to support DeSantis as the only person who can beat Trump, and I think that very well may be a plausible calculation that DeSantis is the only way to stop Trump, at least in the Republican Party. I think the problem I have, or one concern, is that if Ron DeSantis gets in the race, if he musters the courage to get in the race, and if Ron DeSantis actually beats Donald Trump, then what? Because Donald Trump ain't going to go away. In fact, Donald Trump will probably try to sabotage and destroy Ron DeSantis and keep him from actually winning the general election. And he could presumably do it. There's got to be a pretty good chunk of Donald Trump's 30% base that would not vote. If Trump says don't vote for DeSantis, that they won't. And so,
well, Trump could even run third party, which he kind of threatened to do.
He could do that too. But like, is this a suicide mission for Ron DeSantis?
I mean, obviously he can't proceed on the basis that Trump will let me have this. He has to do his best to outmuscle him. But I think the argument, but your larger moral argument, I think a vote for DeSantis to stop Trump only is morally justifiable if DeSantis is not similarly authoritarian. Which my inclination is that he is similarly authoritarian. Obviously, your mileage may vary. I'm sorry that my dog cannot shut up.
But do you think that, like, if Ron DeSantis has been in Congress, he's a sort of a normal Republican congressman. He was in Congress before Donald Trump came down the escalator. Do you think that so I guess the theory would be he's always had some authoritarian tendencies, but he saw what Trump did, how Trump was able to really push the limits on our institutions. And so DeSantis in the past might have been a normal Republican, but now, because Trump has sort of opened his eyes, would become a real threat to liberal democracy. Like, is that sort of the theory?
I mean, I'm judging him based on his more recent actions than his past actions. The fact that he was a humdrum backbencher House member before is relevant to me. He has done things as governor of Florida that really stretched the bounds of his executive power. That may only get upheld because he stacked the judiciary to let him do it.
But I mean, we've had presidents before. I mean, Richard Nixon was obviously impeached, but Lyndon Johnson, There have been plenty of presidents before who played hardball and who used the power of government to try to, as best they could, to enforce, to push their will. Like I think Chris Christie has this in him. He wasn't president, but that's different than trying to overthrow an election, trying to incite a coup and denying the election. And so is it just the case that, yeah, Ron DeSantis he's a jerk. He's not my cup of tea necessarily. But he's going to govern within the bounds of acceptability of Lyndon Johnson, let's say.
I just don't. I don't have that faith. I mean, the fact that he fired a elected DA because he didn't like the policy choices the DA was making, that to me is a very troubling sign. And he hasn't done the same election denialism business because he's won his elections. So I don't know what he would do if he actually lost, if he would accept defeat and move on, or if he would play the Trump card and, foment more insurrection. But the fact that he has used executive power in an inhuman, punitive way, that is troubling to me.
But what if, I guess I would just come back to, what if the only way to stop Donald Trump, because here's the deal. If Trump wins the Republican nomination, he might go up against 81-year-old Joe Biden, who trips and falls on camera the week before the election, just as a recession hits. And then Donald Trump becomes president again. So once you win the nomination, you're in the game. You could become Trump could become president again. Now, I know Democrats may think that they may wish that Trump's the nominee again. They can run against him. I don't want to take that chance. So if the assumption is that the only way to stop Trump from becoming the nominee is to go DeSantis, is that like the lesser of two evils, I guess?
Well, I mean, you got to draw your own line. If your line is election denialism, I honestly, I've not gone back through the DeSantis record to recall if he has said 2020 is rigged or whatnot. I have to go back and check.
I don't think he would have put it that way. He may have said something about it that is not great. I don't know.
But you may have a line and you say, you know what, DeSantis has not crossed that specific line. And I'm willing to accept a whole lot of unseemly behavior for my larger policy goals. We all make, when we have a binary choice in an election, we all do this to some degree.
No, I'm not even talking about a general election right now, though, Bill. Remember, I voted in the Democratic primary to stop Bernie Sanders. I voted for Joe Biden in the primary. I didn't vote for him in the presidential.
Right.
This would be a similar thing. Stop Trump. Is that a noble pursuit to stop Donald Trump? Because as David Frum said, now the velociraptors know how to work the doorknobs. If Trump gets to be president again, he's potentially going to be even more dangerous than he was last time.
I mean, from my vantage point, DeSantis is that dinosaur. DeSantis is the person who will be sharper and more deft with the levers of power than Trump would, with a similar undemocratic bent. So I don't see him as an upgrade. But again, you may set your standards differently. I would. So first, you have to make a decision: is there differentiation between these two people in terms of their basic acceptance of democratic norms? And if you think there's a difference, then fine, go with DeSantis. If you think, you know what, DeSantis probably would be just as bad, you're going to have 10 other choices. You don't have to make that compromise that you have to face that dilemma just yet in this process, because maybe one of these other candidates gets ahead of steam and starts pulling 20-25% and has a real shot at it.
I'm not optimistic about that, but if it happens, if Glenn Youngkin has a shot, then I will probably be out knocking doors or something. I don't know.
Now, one thing we should talk about before we wrap up, you had a column out, the Daily Beast, saying that, it's not Democrats in disarray. Dems are in array. And Republicans, I don't know. We haven't come up with a great term for Republicans in disarray yet. So number one, are there things that Republicans should learn from House Democrats to be more effective? And two, is there any shot of them actually learning those lessons in short order in time for this Republican caucus to govern in a remotely responsible way?
Oh no, they can't be taught. They're not teachable. They don't want to learn. But yeah, there are lessons. These are leadership lessons. I mean, I think that Nancy, Peter Drucker said, "Without a successor, there is no success." These are leadership lessons, and I think Nancy Pelosi, she probably stuck. Well, you could argue she stuck around a little bit long, but she's now passing the baton to a new generation and doing it in, I think, a very orderly succession plan. And she went out on her own terms, I would argue. Nobody really goes out on their own terms, but she went out on top with her head held high. And I think that now, who knows? Maybe it'll become a shit show later. But for now, it looks to be a very orderly transition where she is going to be able to promote Hakeem Jeffries, who is a more of a Nancy Pelosi Democrat than an AOC Democrat. And compare it to the Republican Party, where they just tried 10 Republican senators just voted against Mitch McConnell. You've got Kevin McCarthy, who we don't even know if he's going to become the speaker. But if he does become the speaker, he's going to be beholden to Marjorie Taylor Greene and all that entails. It's going to be chaos in the Republican side. And meanwhile, the Democrats, at least for now, look like they're maybe not military precision, Bill, but they're looking professional. They're looking sharp. And even if you don't like their ideology, like I don't, you have to respect that they seem more sane, they seem more put together, they seem more, dare say, professional.
Yeah, I had a piece up at Politico over the weekend, where I teased out Pelosi's 5 rules for leading the House. And I won't bother you with all 5 of them here. You can go read the article. But I think you can look at Pelosi's, she led the Democrats for 20 years. So number one, just the longevity itself is a sign of Democratic stability. I mean, if they were in disarray, it would be more of a Game of Thrones deal, and it really, really wasn't. On the Republican side, you've had multiple leaders over the course of that period, and there's no real bad year. Here's the year where Pelosi really blew it. I mean, obviously, there's years that she lost the gavel in 2010, but you wouldn't really blame Pelosi for a relatively normal midterm swing.
Well, especially when you consider that part of the reason that she lost the gavel is that she delivered on Obamacare,
Right.
a major overhaul. And so that was, I think, to be expected.
Well, it was losing the battle to win the war. I mean, she, it's not a undefeated streak. She got cap and trade passed, but it fell down in the Senate. And some people say, well, she put her members in an awkward position voting for something that wasn't guaranteed to make it through the Senate. So that you might say that's a demerit. But you wouldn't say that the entire tenure was worthless because she put points on the board that stayed on the board. Not just Obamacare, but also getting a stimulus pass, getting Wall Street reform. So her win-loss record, I think, is very high. It didn't sputter out at the end. I mean, I think I don't love the whole infrastructure kabuki dance that went on, but she did change tack and lean on the progressives. Hey, suck it up and pass this infrastructure bill at the end of the day. So the whole thing took longer than it should have, but that's not wholly her fault. Biden plays the largest role in that mistake, in my opinion. So I think she is one of the most effective speakers of all time, possibly the most. I haven't gone back and really done a list of it. Whereas you look at the Republican side, John Boehner had to quit he had to quit the House.
Predicted here, by the way, right here, Bill. This is where it was predicted that he would be resigning before anywhere else.
That is correct. Matt Lewis had that one.
I had that.
Almost makes up for your Carol Lake prediction.
Almost.
Like, he could not keep the government open without quitting and getting that bill passed with primarily Democratic votes. Like, that is how untenable it is to lead a Republican caucus, and in Boehner's case, with a broader majority. Now, whoever is speaker now, and maybe it's not going to be McCarthy, has to do the basics: keep the government open, raise the debt limit so we don't default on the debt, and be willing to put those bills on the floor, even if Republicans are not fully behind them, so they can pass it with Democratic votes, which would risk your own speakership. And Boehner, in my opinion, is hardly the greatest profile in courage. If he put immigration reform on the table, if he took the Senate immigration compromise and put that on the floor and let that pass, then I would say he was a profile in courage. He didn't have the spine to do that. He at least had the decency to recognize, I got to keep the government open in some way, or else I can't live with myself. And he did that much. And I don't know if Republicans are going to put up a speaker who you can count on doing that. And if they can't, one, if they can't keep the government open, they're going to look like morons. If the lesson of 2022 is don't nominate crazy, I think the evidence over several years now is if you shut down the government, you're crazy, and voters don't like it.
I just had Bruce Melman on the podcast, and he said the big themes. He does this quarterly report. And he said the big themes from the midterms were candidate quality and stability. Voters wanted stability. And if those are the two things, not good news for Republicans right now.
I said, before, what drove my predictions of this, which is the midterms are balance elections, not referendums. And typically, you take a chunk out of the governing party for balance purposes. But if you're the opposition party and you seem unbalanced, then that doesn't work. And I think they obviously lost a lot of races where they were putting up unbalanced candidates.
Yes, I like that, unbalanced. That's Roy Teixeira said on Jonah Goldberg's podcast that the election was about one party was out of touch, the other party was out of their minds. I guess out of touch.
Well, and Teixeira has been hitting the point hard. The Democrats are out of the mainstream on culture issues, especially crime. And he had a point. Democrats in the exit poll, voters vastly preferred Republicans over Democrats in terms of crime. Strong Patrick Maloney said, we got killed in the New York suburbs, Westchester, Rockland, Dutchess, Long Island, because the combination of Fox News and the New York Post scared the bejesus out of suburbanites when it came to crime. And Oregon Democrats struggled. They survived on the governor's race. They couldn't pick. They lost Oregon 5. I think just Oregon 5. Forgive me if there's another one in there. And arguably crime concerns with Portland, fed into that. And Mandela Barnes, I think, blew a winnable race. He ended up overperforming the polls. He only lost by 1 point. But I think a candidate who wasn't hit hard on crime as he was could have beat Ron Johnson, who was a weak candidate, weak incumbent. So there are things that Democrats have to worry about there. But where I might part with Teixeira is I don't think Democrats, by and large, on their actual policies are that far left on crime. They voted to fund the police in this Congress. Joe Biden's not to fund the police, or many congressional candidates.
No, I agree. And I think there's a huge contrast between the perception of Democrats based on what the left says or academia or Twitter versus the politicians. And I just thought that the perception was going to win out, that perception mattered more. And that was maybe a miscalculation on my part.
Well, it depended on the race. And I haven't had the opportunity to go through every single House race ad campaign, but I know just anecdotally some candidates literally had ads, Democrats saying, I reject the fund of the police. I want to fund the police. I know John Fetterman. John Fetterman, arguably the guy who had a similar record to Mandela Barnes in terms of supporting parole of people with felony records and giving people second chances, that kind of thing. Fetterman was able to leaven that by saying, "Hey, I was Mayor of Braddock, and I work with the police, and we stop violent crime. I got the tattoos of the people murdered in my city on my arm. I carry that with me."
But do you think race might have had something to do with that too, though?
I mean, I think the Wisconsin Republicans had race baiting ads, but we know that other African American Democrats have faced race baiting ads and overcome them. Barack Obama overcame it, Antonio Delgado, Lauren Underwood. There are ways to.
No, but what I'm saying, it's not just race, but it's when the issue is crime, and you have a candidate who is vulnerable on that based on things he said, and he's black. That's a combination. Is that harder to overcome than if you're John Fetterman, for example?
Well, Sean Patrick Maloney is pretty white. Pretty darn white, and lost in the Hudson Valley. I mean, he was being hit because when he ran for attorney general, he said he was against cash bail. That was the one thing I think they really had on Maloney, like something that came out of his mouth. So it wasn't just a vague Democrats bad thing. And I'm sure Maloney regrets taking that position. He might have taken it out of expediency and to win that primary because he's generally a pretty moderate guy. You can defend the end of cash bail on the grounds that we should be judging these decisions based on their threat to the community, not based on how much money there is in their pocket. But it was very easy to spin that as these people want to let criminals out. So I think it was Mandela Barnes said things that were usable fodder without the same kind of mitigating aspects that Fetterman had. Fetterman had mitigating aspects in his record that he played very, very hard and very, very effectively. So I think most Democrats are able to say and are comfortable saying, I want to fund the police. And if they do that very pointedly, they can, Stan Greenberg, Democratic pollster, had a piece in the American Prospect where he tested a bunch of messages. And he basically, the strongest messages is, there are only 5 Democrats that wanted to fund the police in the House, and I reject their position wholly. Like if you actively punch them in the face, that's the best message you could have. And no Democrat went quite that far, but saying I reject the funding of the police is pretty close. And I think more and more Democrats are going to be more comfortable doing that, seeing what worked in this election.
All right. Well, with that, it's time for me to go take another Dayquil. But I do want to say again publicly, kudos to you for the Katie Hobbs pick. You were right. I was wrong. You were not wish casting. You are great. Go Australian rules football. Eat donuts and go bowling.
I appreciate that, sir. And kudos to you on your John Boehner call. We should never forget how on the mark that was. And we'll talk next week.
All right. See you back here on the DMZ. Have a good one, Bill. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Remember, I'll repost my Twitter thread on how to watch WKRP's turkey drop properly.
I wait for it every year, Bill. See you, man.
Take care.